Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa's call on all Chief of Defense Staff of ECOWAS countries to work in unity to prevent military takeovers and undemocratic change of governments in their countries. And we've been speaking with Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, who is the Regional Coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for staying with us. Now, I was talking about, before we went on the break, the matter of we knowing what our interests are, because you were talking about the fact that our foreign policy hasn't been able to capture that in such a way that we are not looking beggarly when we are seeking assistance from these foreign countries. And I am saying that maybe we need to situate what our interests are in such a way that we can strategically position ourselves and not look beggarly.
Yes, thank you so much. I think the interest, of course, I'm not part of the people formulating, who are driving the foreign policy of Nigeria. But the interest should be very, very clear in the areas that you prioritize. So, for instance, one of the issues that have afflicted Nigeria or most countries in West Africa now is security. So the starting point will be, which country do we partner with? And what kind of support do we need from them? What has been the nature of our relationship with this country over time? Have they been able to live up to our expectation when it matters? Or they ditch us in certain areas, like you have seen when one country decided not to sell arms to Nigeria, and Nigeria needed to look in another direction. How do you consider the pros and cons of that? Another critical area now is, because I think what we're facing now is purely what some people have described as poly crisis, in which one problem is leading to another. So you look at the case of food insecurity in Nigeria now. What kind of support should we be expecting from the countries that should support us at this critical time? If you look at the case of Nigeria, what are our area of comparative advantage compared to those countries? What do we have that we also possibly need, whether diplomatically or in terms of material resources? So I think these are some of the things that are very, very important to really drive what we want to probably bring out of these bilateral or multilateral relationship. And what is also very, very important, which I think we also need to elevate in this conversation, is the quality of people actually driving those ideas. What do they know? What is their level of exposure? What is their interest in all these things? Which is very, very important. So you find a situation in which they used to say that, I think maybe some decades ago, that Africa is the centerpiece of Nigerian foreign policy. But if you ask anybody on the streets now, I think we are even missing in that equation. We are not able to influence strategic decision even within our region. That, like, if you sneeze, others are probably going to catch cold. Talk less of, okay, we're a giant of Africa, but in what area? How are we exploring or utilizing the diplomatic tools that we have at our disposal? How are we able to maybe utilize the material resources that we have, the human capability, the human capital that we have to influence decision making, to influence things that are going to affect our whole strategic choices as a nation? I think these are very, very critical. Prioritizing the areas that matter to Nigeria now. Is it health? Is it agriculture? Is it security? And how those things are actually reflecting in our foreign policy. And another thing that I think is very, very important that I need to say is that a country the size of Nigeria, with the latitude and opportunities that we have, it's also very important that we are not being used as a pawn, particularly when it comes to the East-West power rivalry between the West and the East, or maybe with China and all those things. Are we able to stand and own our home place to say this is what we stand for? Or we're dilly-dallying on critical issues that are very, very important when it comes to maybe international cooperation or decisions? Those are very, very important. Anybody that has watched the foreign policy of Nigeria, particularly in the past 1 decade, if you want to be sincere, you will agree that it has actually caved in. And for me, as an optimist, I'm only hoping that the present administration is actually able to resuscitate that and bring it alive to the point that people can respect Nigeria. Nigeria can determine what happens, say, maybe around the Gulf of Guinea. Countries know that you have a regional hegemon here that is able to exert influence within the region. I think that should be, that is what should come alive now, as far as our foreign policy relation is concerned.
All right. So another tool that has been used, to spread instability, other threats to insecurity, especially in Africa, is religious extremism. Perhaps this should be on the radar of the ECOWAS chiefs.
Well, I don't think it's within their beat to look in that direction, and the reason is quite obvious. Religion is a matter of socio-cultural expression, and I think there are other critical social infrastructure within the society to take care of that. If you make critical investment in agriculture, to the point that the youth in those communities are not vulnerable to recruitment by armed groups, if you make critical investment in, education, which is very, very key, that opens the mind of the people to know what is right from what is wrong, then it makes it a bit difficult also for the extremist group to be able to recruit people into their camp. And then if you make critical investment in anchoring certain programs on religious infrastructure within the society, you're talking about whether the Christian or the Muslim religion, you're talking about the guild of Islamic scholars, you talk about pastors who are talking to people in their local community, the non-governmental organizations, the community-based organizations, the civil society organizations in those regions. A country like Nigeria, has several pillars under their counter-violent extremism program domicile in the Office of the National Security Advisor. So if you make critical investment in those areas, the military can only concentrate on the things that matter to them, which is strategic defense, which is security, both internal and external, particularly in particular, defending the territorial integrity of the country and not meddling with other issues that will become strategic distraction to them. So I know, of course, it should be on their radar, but I don't think it's their beat to deal with that. Government should make critical investment in these other areas, and those issues will be naturally taken care of, right, even though it...
Now, the ECOWAS defense chief is also looking at, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that's Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, was talking about the matter of the movement of small arms and light weapons. And he talked about the development of mechanisms to complement existing ECOWAS convention on small arms and light weapons to effectively prevent further proliferation of these weapons. What do you think should form part of this mechanism that they are looking to develop? Because that is a major challenge when we're talking about small arms and light weapons.
Well, I think those infrastructure are already there. If you go to Francophone countries, for instance, they have about 3 layers of security. They have the military hub there, and they have the gendarme, and then they have the police. We don't have that kind of structure like in place like Nigeria. But if we also look at the proliferation of security agencies, I think we have something similar. And what you have the civil defense, you have the police, you have the military, and some other entities that are, considered to also be providing some form of security in that regard. So I think they need to leverage that. If you, like the case of the dam in Francophone countries, they work in the interland, the rural areas, the frontiers, what they call like borders, to actually secure those people. How do we reinforce that? I think what is missing in all these things largely is, one, there is dearth of critical investment in building capabilities at that level, providing the necessary security and defense hardware to actually support security operation in those places. Very, very important. And the second thing, which I think is also very, very important, is the fact that you need to co-opt the local communities. One of the areas that I don't think probably anybody is looking into is the proliferation of gunsmiths who are actually manufacturing the small and light weapons that you mentioned. If you have seen probably in the media reporting, we see all kinds of fabrication that is going on in the northwestern part of the country. That is the level of ingenuity that criminals have developed. In most cases, they are partnering with these local gunsmiths. Who are the people regulating those local gunsmiths? At the time that we are talking about silencing the gun by 2030, Nobody's looking in that direction. You need to regulate them. You need to bring them under control, maybe to a divisional, at the divisional police level, to note what they are producing and who are their who are the people patronizing their products. You know, this is something that is transferred from our ancient society to the modern time, when those things are probably being manufactured for the purpose of livelihood support. Gunsmith gets money and it sells to the hunter. But in modern time, they are people gone sophisticated that they can produce a double barrel cartridge. So those entities need to be regulated. In most cases, when police made arrests, the weapons that they get from those criminals are not sophisticated weapons. So I think the ECOWAS head of state, military heads are meeting, and their foreign affairs counterparts are also meeting. It is very, very important to look into a regulatory mechanism that addresses the local production of the light weapons that we mentioned. And the second thing, we can't overemphasize it, is the fact about border porosity. We need to strengthen security across our borders in terms of policing the borders. For instance, Nigeria has about 1,500 kilometer stretch of a border with Nigeria Republic. The policing presence in those areas is almost zero in most places. So how do we strengthen security, border security mechanisms at that level, making critical investment in technology, which I think is also very, very critical now, because security has gone beyond the regular hardware of chasing, patrol, and all those things, to clear deployment of technology, to be able to detect in real time and also provide necessary response in real time to security threats that might be emanating in those places. So I think they need to focus on these three issues that I mentioned, strengthening we've also talked about the role of the multinational joint task force, particularly in critical issues like counter-insurgency.
I know there's so much you have to say. Unfortunately, our time is up. We must thank you, Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, Regional Coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Dakar, Senegal, for your time on the program. Thank you
so much for having me.
Thank you.